originally they were the Black Panther Party. That's right. They were both combined at one point. They were a part of the Great Black Panther Party. And it was an interesting story behind how the two came about. So when the Black Panther Party was finally having its downfall, and they eventually, broke apart, and a lot of them went into hiding and things of that nature. There were two brothers that, for whatever reason, they left and went to California. And they go to California, and I guess they were discussing ideas or something, whatever the situation was. And whatever happened led to the two brothers getting into some sort of a beef with each other. These are two brothers, mind you. They get into some sort of a beef, and they decide to basically break their brotherhood and their bond, and they go out and create their own gangs called the Crips and the Bloods. And these gangs were created to basically fight each other and hate each other, things of that nature. But when you fast forward a little bit farther into time, more current, these gangs are enormous. And a lot of the members probably don't even realize that they are fighting a battle that pretty much has nothing to do with them. They're fighting a battle or a war that was started by a group of individuals, two groups of individuals, who are no longer around or are dead and gone or in prison for life, things of that nature. And all these new gangs, all these new gang members, they are all they've joined these gangs not even realizing that they're fighting a battle that has nothing to do with them and the ones that started it are long gone. And I'm pretty sure that's not true for all of them. Some of them probably do know that, my bad, I'm driving and stuff, but a lot of them probably do know, the backstory of how their gang came about. But I just found that to be very interesting, and I understand why a lot of our young black guys, young black boys and men decide to join these gangs.
In 1 3/4 miles, take exit 328A on the right to I-95 South.
Especially when so much of us, grow up or so many of us grow up in a single mother household, and they don't have that father figure to help them lead a life of being a true man. And so when they don't have that, they go out, seeking for that. They go out seeking for that brotherhood. They go out seeking for that father figure that they need in their life. And, where you grow up most certainly matters, because if you're growing up in a neighborhood where the Crips are the most prosperous, they're the most successful, and every time you see one, they're showing signs of good success, is what a lot of people call it. And you see the brotherhood and the bond that they have with each other, that might be something that would interest you, especially as a young man. That might be something that piques your interest in.
Take exit 328A on the right to I-95 South.
You go and you join in on that because you're seeing those are the guys that have the money. Those are the guys that have power. They have brotherhood. They have, strong figures in there that you can look up to. Strong male figures in there that you can look up to. And so you join looking for that. But again, a lot of them don't realize that these gangs were made to fight each other over a beef between two brothers that are probably long dead. You can't be mad at those guys, who joined, because like I said, a lot of them aren't joining, to fight that battle or that beef. They're joining for like I just said, for the brotherhood and for the father figures and for the hood success that they see as they were growing, that they saw while they were growing up. But when they join, they get taught, that the red team is bad, or same thing with the Bloods. It's the same situation. They join in and they're taught that the blue team is bad and we don't mess with them.
Continue on 995.
The beef and the war continues, but most people don't even know what the war is about. Why? I wonder if anybody involved in those gangs ever asked the question, why do we hate the other guys? Why do we hate the guys that wear blue? Or why do we hate the guys that wear red? I wonder if they ever actually asked those kinds of questions, rather than just joining in blindly. And then the kind of success that they get into, or the kind of things that they get into while they're there, they might not be so good, but again, when you're growing up in bad neighborhoods, and only way that you see how guys around you get money is by doing illegal things, then that's there's a high chance of you getting into that, of you joining in on that, especially when there's a gang of people that do it. There's a large group of guys that join in together to grow the things that are done, the ways that they make money in the hood. And you see that, you got the guys that are riding around in nicer cars than everybody else. They're flaunting a little bit more, and stuff like that. That'll outweigh the risks of doing stuff like that. That'll outweigh the risk of going to prison or getting shot and killed. Because when they see it, they see, that's how I make my money. This is how I can get successful. This is how I can help my mom. And it's it's easy. It's an easy thing for them to get into, because it's harder to actually go outside of your neighborhood and seek out other ways, better ways to find success and to make their money. So, that's the harder thing to do. It's harder to seek out different role models. It's harder to seek out other routes to making money and creating success for yourself. And then most people in our generation, they don't want to work a job. They don't want to have to go to work, and they figure, if they join in with this, they don't have to go to work. They can just do what the other guys are doing, and they'll be in the same position as them eventually. Which is true to a certain degree. But again, it's all about risk management. Is it worth the risk? For a lot of people, that is. And when I bring this kind of topic up in a conversation, I get a lot of heat from it, because it's like, well, they have no choice, or at least they feel that they have no choice, and that's just the environment that they grow up in, things of that nature. But I'm the kind of man, I say to comments like that, I say, I believe that there's always a choice in what you do, no matter what. Even if it's life or death, that's a choice in and of itself. It's life or death. You have a choice. I believe there's always a choice that you can make. And you can make that choice to go out and better yourself. But that is the harder thing to do, because the easiest thing to do would just be, join in with the neighborhood crew and do what they do. That's the easy thing to do. It's easy. It's easier to go out and sell drugs, especially as a young black man. When we grow up around that, and that's all we see, and those are the only guys we see around us that have money. That's the easiest thing for you to do is to take that route. But to a certain point, you gotta come to terms with yourself and have a conversation with yourself and say, is this worth it? You know, yeah, I'm making money now, and yeah, I might be helping my mom out a little bit now, but what happens if I go to prison for 15 years? Well, all of that stops, and the little help that I was given, or maybe even the major help that I was given, all of that comes to a stop. And all that comes to a standstill because you're locked up in prison for 15 years. Or what happens if you get shot and killed over something petty, you know, some money, or somebody felt like you shorted them on their purchase. You know, and then they end up shooting and killing you. Now you're never gonna be able to help because you're dead. And you can't do nothing when you're dead. So, you know, it's all about mind over matter. You know, yeah, it might be good for you in the short term, but what about the long run? You got to think about the long run as well. When you think about the long run, you know, is this gonna, you know, it's helping out now, but what about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? You know, are you still gonna be operating at that same level? Are you still gonna have that same kind of influence that you feel like you have? Because I'll tell you right now, when I grew up and I was seeing those guys that were doing those kinds of things, when you look at them now, they're nothing like that. You know, those nice cars that they had, gone. All that money that they had that they were flaunting around, gone. You know, and they did a lot of time and spent a big portion of their life locked up in prison. And then when you get out of prison, you know, you lost your rank in whatever crew that you were in, because you've been gone for 15 years, and you come back, yeah, they're gonna welcome you with open arms because maybe you didn't snitch or you did the bid, you know, you took one for the team. But even then, you know, everything that you've done up until that point is gone, and now you start from ground zero once again, and that happens every time you get caught up with the law. I'm saying all this to say there are better ways, you know, to go out and find your version of success. You know, doing those kinds of things is very low level, especially in this day and age. You know, that we have so many options and so many choices and so many routes that we can take, that if you choose to take that route, that literally just means that you're taking the easy way out. You know, and that's just it, you know. Most people don't want to go out and do the hard things, you know, because the hard things are, in and of itself, they are hard to do. They take a lot of effort, they take time, they take consistency. And when people hear those kinds of words, they have a certain degree of fear, you know, and they always ask that question, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if at first you don't succeed, you must try again, right? A lot of people don't want to do that. They're not willing to do that. Even if they know for a fact that this is something that could change the trajectory of their lives, they're still not willing to do it. I mean, they'll try it for a little bit, but the moment that they run into a challenge, or the second that they run into a loss, you know, then they take it as such. You know, they take, well, instead of saying, well, this is just a loss and I'll use this as a stepping stone, they say, well, I lost, and then they throw their hands up in the air and they go back to their, you know, poor lifestyle choices. You know, they fall back into the old habits. You know, and then let's say that they don't use the loss as they lost, and they take it as a stepping stone. Well, then a lot of people come to the next phase where the longevity steps in. You know, how long are you willing to do this? You know, some people, they want it to work that day, and if it didn't work that day, it ain't gonna work. Some people, they might last a week. Some people might last a month. You know, some might even make it all the way to a year, and then they come to a breaking point where they're just like, hey, this isn't gonna work. But little do they know, if they would have just worked a little harder, if they would have done just a little more, their entire life could have been changed. But, you know, a lot of people aren't in for it, you know, for the long run. That goes for a lot of our generation. You know, they don't want to be in it for the long run. They, you know, we want our instant gratification. You know, I want it now. If it doesn't happen now, I don't want it. You know, you tell somebody, hey, I'll give you this. You know, I'll teach you how to do this, but it'll take you 10 years. But after that 10 years is up, you'll be making, you know, $10 million or something of that nature. That $10 million will sound good, but that 10 years is going to turn them off. 10 years? You telling me I got to work 10 years to get to a certain point? No. I can find something better. I can find something that I can, you know, I can do it within a year and I'll make that. And then they go out there and then they, you know, they leave that opportunity, throw it in the garbage can, and then they go out and they go searching for the same opportunity, or a better opportunity. And then they end up not finding one, you know, because they threw away a really great opportunity. Not to say that other opportunities won't present themselves, but if an opportunity like that presents itself to you again, it's probably going to be pretty similar. But, you know, people don't want to do that. They want the instant gratification. You know, I want it to work now. It's my money and I want it now. Ain't that what the commercial says? And, you know, and that's just what it is. I'm going a little farther off topic than what I was talking about. But I mean, it's true, you know, but it all ties in together because, you know, that instant gratification, that's what a lot of people join in for. You know, they see, you know, that I'm not saying that this is in all cases, but, you know, for example, drug money. You know, that drug money is instant. You know, you make that transaction and you got cash right there in your hand immediately. You know, you go out and you rob somebody, you know, that's immediate. You know, you rob them, take their money or whatever you take from them, and you got that, whatever that value was that you got out of it, it was immediate. You know, but they never asked, like, well, how long is this going to last? How long can I get away with this? Is this worth my life? And if it is for some people, you know, then, you know, do you. But if it isn't, you know, if doing that kind of thing is something that you know is not you, or something that you know that you shouldn't be doing, you know, and when you're doing something like that, you know there's a better way for me to do something like this, and then you just ignore that voice in your head that's telling you that, and you just go back to doing it, well, then that just makes you an idiot. That just makes you an idiot. Because if you know that there is something that you could be doing to make yourself better, and you still don't do it, well, then that's on you. Like I said, choices and decisions to be made. But yeah, y'all, I just wanted to get on here and you know, give my little spill on that, because that's a very interesting thing. That the Crips and Bloods used to be one gang. They used to be the Black Panther Party, and when they broke off, when they fell apart, the brothers go to California and then they get into their own beef. They create gangs to fight each other, and then those gangs have been, you know, around ever since. And most of the members today don't even realize the origin of their gangs. You know, they don't know the history that goes into it, because if they did know the history, then they probably wouldn't be hating each other as much as they do. And in some cases, they might even want to join forces because we're stronger together. And you know, as the black culture, for some reason, we don't do good at working together. You know, we always fighting each other. You know, always fighting each other, killing each other, hating on each other rather than building each other up. Little do we know, if we all came together, if we were all willing to come together, we would be so powerful. It would be unfathomable how powerful we would be if we were all willing to just come together and make each other's weaknesses into strengths, and strengthen each other's strengths, make each other's strengths stronger. You know, there's no limit to the things that we would be able to accomplish. So yeah. that's my spiel for the day, y'all. Ray Worldwide out. Peace.